What if your real estate agent could show you homes that no other buyers are looking at? Homes that you don't need to wait in line and tour at an open house at the same time as 45 other buyers who are stepping on your toes and bumping into you as you're trying to look at the bedrooms and navigate around furniture. What if you could make an offer on a house without having to compete against 20 other offers? My name's Brian. I am a local real estate agent here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and my team and I have helped over 400 clients, at this point closer to 500 clients, to buy and sell homes in our market. About half of those clients were buyers, and a lot of those buyers were probably just like you. They were people that were overwhelmed by the lack of homes out there for sale available on the market. Some of those clients even had been working with other agents previously and had been looking for months, if not years, and even put in offers on 5 or 6 other homes, only to not have any of those offers get accepted prior to working with us. There's a big problem out there right now with the lack of inventory in the market. The good news is it is not too good to be true. There are solutions. There are opportunities for you as a home buyer to find these homes that, like I said, no other buyers are looking at. Before we get too far into that, let me just say, I think that as professional real estate agents, it's our job to solve problems. I think any business person, it's your job to solve problems. So we saw this problem and we came up with a solution, and that's what I'm going to give you here today in this video. Before you can solve a problem, though, you've got to really assess the problem. You've got to know what the problem is. So in this particular case, I have this broken down into 4 problem areas, and this is how you're going to know if this is a solution that could work for you. If any of these things sound like you, maybe you've been in the market for a period of time, like I said, working with an agent, haven't been able to find what you're looking for, or maybe you haven't gotten into the market yet, but you're kind of afraid to because you've heard friends and family who have bought houses in the last year or 2 or 3, and you've heard their horror stories of all the things they've went through. The 4 main problems. Again, I have this broken down into 4 areas. I've got it all written down here. Timing. Your timing is rushed out there in the market. When you've got one house and you've got 10 buyers that all want to see it, everybody wants to be first. That's not necessarily a good thing when you're a buyer. Being rushed is not a good thing when you're looking to make one of the biggest decisions of your life. And if I'm being honest, as an agent who, again, works with buyers and sellers, having all those buyers that are in a rush isn't always the good thing, the best thing, I should say, for the sellers either. But let's focus on, you right now. Let's focus on the buyers. What is the problem with these rush timelines? Well, you've got to wait in line to see the house because everybody's trying to be first, right? The first opportunity, the first time the home comes on the market and is available for showings, everybody wants to be first one in the door. So you get there and there's 10 other people. If there's an open house, the open house starts at 11. I did an open house a couple weeks ago and got to the house at 10:40 and I couldn't even find a parking spot. There were cars lined up the street for like a quarter of a mile. And all of them were there to come to the open house. And they were there 20 minutes before the open house started. And they, didn't even start on time because I had to park way up the street and it took me forever. And there was already people walking around the yard and it was hectic. Then all those people came into the house, right? So as buyers are trying to look, there's 30 other buyers that are walking around at the same time. It's hard to get a look at a house that's designed for 4 or 5 or maybe 6, 7, 8 people. In most cases, at the most, living in that house, right? Maybe you have some company over, you might have 10 or 12 people. Houses aren't designed to have 30 people walking around in them, okay? The rooms are not big enough. The hallways and doorways are not big enough. That's a huge turnoff when you're trying to look at a house. But it's what you've got to do as a buyer right now if you're looking at homes that are on the market, assuming that, you're in a desirable area and that you're looking for probably the same thing everybody else is looking for. And then what happens if your real estate agent that you're working with goes out of town for a weekend? God forbid real estate agents take a vacation, right? How are you going to get into a house? maybe no houses have come up in the last 2 weeks. I know as a real estate agent, as soon as I even think about going on a vacation or a trip or even just taking one day off, that's the day that all of the houses that meet the needs of every buyer who I've talked to even in the last 3 years, they all come on the market on that same day. That's the week that every seller who I've talked to in the last 3 years that's been waiting for one thing or another, they all call and say, hey, Brian, I'm finally ready. Can you put my house on the market this weekend? So what happens in those situations? Again, you as a buyer, you call your agent, your agent's out of town. Maybe there's not an open house. What do you do? How do you get into that house? Do you call the listing agent who works for the sellers, doesn't work for you? Is that always going to be in your best interest? Not necessarily, but it's in the best interest of you actually getting an opportunity to see that house. And then of course your agent is trying to write an offer from, the beach or the pool or whatever. And what's going to happen there is, could something get missed? Do agents make mistakes when they're trying to do all of this work on their phone? Unfortunately, yes, we're only human. The house, you got to find it the second it comes on the market, right? So you've got a job too, right? And you're supposed to be working. And what are you doing? You're sitting at work, refreshing your Zillow tab over and over and over again, 8 times a day, 20 times a day. You're exploring, other states just because you want to look at a house. And when you zoom in on your area on the map, there's not even any houses for you to look at. So what do? You zoom out, And I get buyers that are looking in, the North Hills. Again, we're in the city of Pittsburgh. And what do? They go on one of these websites, they zoom out. And the next thing you know, they're sending me homes that are in, the eastern part of the city, 40 minutes away from where they originally wanted to move. And that's not necessarily a bad thing for some of those buyers, but if you know what you want and you know what area you have to be in, that's not going to work for you, right? And then what happens, when it comes to writing up the offer and you're trying to determine closing dates, trying to know what you're going to do on a random, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 45 days from now. What's your work schedule going to be like? What's your workload? Are you going to be able to take a day off? What activities do the kids have? Should we do the closing in the morning or the afternoon or the evening? That's a little bit tough, 45 days ahead of time to try to know and come up with that on a rush timeline, right? Where you don't even have time to think about it. And then trying to guess, what's the seller's timeline? Maybe they don't know either. When's the best time for them? So most agents, if they do anything at all in some of these competitive offer situations, they ask, what's the seller's desired closing date? There's a lot of things the seller might be desiring in the ideal offer. The closing date may or may not even be one of them. Maybe they haven't even thought about it. Taking the time to have those conversations, though, and be able to determine that, I think is an important thing that sometimes gets lost, again, in these rushed situations. And if you've got a home to sell, if you own your current home, obviously you don't want 2 homes. You're going to have to sell your current home before or after. God forbid you need to use the proceeds from your current home to buy your next house, right? You need to sell that home first. You probably need a home sale contingency. Forget about that in a competitive offer situation. And again, focusing on the timing, how do you time out when to sell your current home, which is probably going to sell quickly if you don't know where you're going to move next yet. These are all problems that have to do with the timing right now, that have to do with the lack of inventory out there. Like I said, stay with me. This video is only going to be a few minutes long, and I'm going to give you the solution. But again, I think it's important that in order for us to know what the solution is, we've got to know what the problem is and know if you are the right person for this system. I hinted at communication, right? Talking to the seller and asking the seller, what's your ideal closing date? Again, maybe they care about closing date, maybe they don't. Maybe there's other factors that are important. Buyers and sellers don't get to communicate directly with each other. Now that's by design, but what's happening in some of these situations is the agents who are supposed to be talking to each other, they're not even talking to each other. And a lot of the times it's because of timing and availability. If I've got 20 agents all calling me, if I'm the listing agent, let's just say, I represent the seller and I've got 20 agents that are all calling me and they've all got questions and we're trying to get them answers to their questions and we're trying to talk with them about, what's the best ideal offer. Well, there's only so many hours in the day, right? And in these rush timelines, you might have one buyer that needs a response tonight, or thinks they need a response, is asking for a response tonight. Maybe it's a good offer, but you've got another buyer who's asking questions about, utility costs and things like that. A lot of the times as the listing agents, I know we don't always get to answer all of those questions in the time that we want, because we don't always have the answers. I have to call the seller. I have to wait for, them to get back to me, because we've already sent them out for the weekend. They're on a trip, right? They left town, they went camping for the weekend because they knew we were going to be showing their house all weekend. So they're trying to make the house available. But what they've done is they've kind of made themselves unavailable to answer some of these questions. And before I can even get the answers and get back to some of the buyers, there's another buyer who's already made an offer that's a great offer, and they want a response immediately, right? So again, focusing on the buyers, how do you get your questions answered? How much are the utilities? What if there's something on the seller's disclosure that's kind of a red flag, but they didn't really explain it and you're not sure. Is this a big deal? Is this a small thing? Or if we even get an opportunity to do a home inspection, is the seller going to come back and say, no, we already told you about that issue? And, getting to do a home inspection and having that contingency is another thing altogether that we'll talk about. And then what happens, again, you're relying on the agents to talk to each other. Your agent might be the best thing in the world. What happens if the seller's agent is just not really with it? You'd be surprised how many seller's agents will list a house, put it on the market, and then leave town for the weekend. The seller went camping and the agent went with them. Everybody's unavailable. What do you do as a buyer in that situation when you've got questions that need to be answered and you can't get them answered, but there's other buyers who maybe they just didn't notice, maybe they're being careless, or maybe they're just being super aggressive and trying to get their offer accepted by ignoring those questions and coming in with a quick offer and trying to rush the seller to give them a response. The next thing that I wrote down here, when you don't have communication between the buyer and seller, how do you know, what's the ideal closing date? What are the ideal terms? Price is important, right? But price isn't always even the most important thing. And that's something that, I'm going to say, if you're looking at our system that I'm going to explain to you here in a second, and you're wondering, is this for me? I would just tell you right now that this system is not for somebody whose main priority, again, as a buyer, is to lowball on price, okay? If we find the seller and their house is worth $200,000, but you only want to offer $150,000, and there's plenty of $200,000 homes out there on the market, you just don't want to pay $200,000 for them, then this system is probably not for you. Now, you can get a great deal, especially when you're not competing against 50 other buyers. We just had a client that did this, and their house that they got was literally $200,000 less than what it would have been if it was on the market, and we have the appraisal to prove that. But that was not the primary objective when we talked to that, when we reached out to the seller initially, and certainly when the seller got back to us, they weren't raising their hand saying, hey, I'd like to accept a lowball offer for my house. However, over the course of literally months of communicating directly with that seller, we were able to determine, price was not the most important thing, and there was a price that we were able to agree on that was a win for everybody, but in this case, it was a win for the buyer because it was a lot less than that house would have gotten had it been on the market. And that's what I'll say about price. Again, there's a couple other reasons why this might not be for you. We already talked about timing. If you've got 30 days to move, something like that, then our system is going to be very tough for you, and you probably should be focusing on homes that are on the market today with sellers that are ready to go. And you are going to need to rush anyways because of your timeline, not just the market in general. So a little bit of patience is required, and again, a lot of communication. We're looking at communication as a good thing. We're looking at the lack of communication that's often out there in the market right now as a bad thing. Other problems, your financing options. We talked about price. We talked about, home sale contingencies. Forget getting one of those accepted in a multiple offer situation. Sometimes you're competing against cash. Even just having a mortgage can make your offer less desirable on, I was going to say for some properties, but really it's not necessarily the property itself. Sometimes it's just the seller. Maybe they have some sort of preconceived notion or assumption about, mortgages versus cash offers. Again, price isn't always the most important. I've seen a lot of times where a seller has taken a lesser offer just because it was cash, and that was something that was important to them for one, indirect reason or another. The other thing is you get a mortgage. Well, what about the appraisal? The house has to appraise for the price. If you're going way above the price because you're competing against 10 other buyers and you want to be the highest, right, which is counterintuitive as a buyer, that you want to be the highest price, but that's what you have to do to get the house. What if it doesn't appraise for that? The seller, are they going to be willing to come down in price? Depends, but in a lot of cases, probably not. A lot of sellers aren't even taking seriously offers that have appraisal contingencies in there or don't have appraisal contingencies in there, where essentially the language in the contract is saying, this is our offer, but it's based on this price and this loan amount, and this is what it needs to be. Otherwise, this offer, we reserve the right to terminate, essentially. I'm not an attorney, but we'll just leave it at that. So that's a lot of the problems that kind of cause this emotional roller coaster, right? It's hard to find a house that you love, put in an offer on it, and not fall in love with it, right? If you can't see yourself living there, then you shouldn't be putting in the offer. However, once you've already seen yourself living in the house, it's very disappointing when you get that call from your agent and unfortunately the offer didn't get accepted. It does happen. It happens even to us on our team. Does not happen very often when we're utilizing all of the tools, all of the steps within this system. But again, this system's not for everyone, but hopefully it'll be for you here. The other thing is that fear of loss, right? We have had clients where this system is not for them. We've had clients where we run through the system and no, we're not able to find them their dream house that checks all of the boxes in the area where they're looking. But here's what we do determine, and here's what we can find during that process. If you've got a neighborhood and there's 100 homes in that neighborhood and that's where you want to be, and let's say one house is listed and sold 3 months ago, and you didn't get a chance at that one, maybe you weren't even in the market then, maybe you made an offer, you just weren't ready, you weren't aware of what was going on out there in the market, the offer didn't get accepted, but now you've got your heart set on that neighborhood. No other homes have come on the market. Before you go and buy a house somewhere else, you're probably worrying, what happens if we make an offer on this house in this other neighborhood and then the very next day, one of the houses in that neighborhood that we love comes on the market. We're afraid that we might lose out on our dream house because we've sacrificed on something else. Now, we've had buyers before who we've said, listen, no homes have come on the market in the last 6 months. We've talked to a lot of the homeowners through, because that's what we do as part of the system. I'm going to explain it in a second. We've talked to all of the homeowners and it doesn't seem like anybody's even going to be moving. Of course, things change all the time. Somebody could get relocated for a job tomorrow that wasn't planning on moving today. But, the chances are it's not looking like anything's going to be popping up in that neighborhood anytime soon. And the buyer says, okay, well, at least now we know. At least we know that, we put our best foot forward. There's no sense in waiting for something that, may or may not happen, and it might not be for a long time. And then they're perfectly comfortable going and finding a home somewhere else. And in those situations, everything usually works for the best. But again, it's that emotional roller coaster, that fear of loss when you're out there in the market and you don't know if the house that is in the dream neighborhood that you want to live in is going to come on the market again. So those are all the problems. Now that we've gotten all of that out of the way, like I said, I think as business owners, and my business specifically being in real estate, and what's going to help you is the solutions to all of those problems. That's why you're all here. So we designed a system on our team. We have a name for it. We use it kind of internally. We call it the CDP times 2 method. Now that might not mean anything to you. That sounds complicated and confusing, but it stands for something. CDP, or CDP times 2. The first thing that we need to do with all of our clients is sit down and have what we call a consultation with them. That's the first C. The consultation is where we're going to find out what are your wants, what are your needs, what is your desired neighborhood that you want to be in, and then we're going to look, here's what's sold in the last 6 months, here's what's sold in the last year that meets your criteria in that area or in that market. And depending on how big or small that market is, you know, there might be 80 homes that have sold in the last year, but there might be one. Now we know we're looking for a needle in a haystack. A lot of buyers say, you know, I'm sorry, I think we're picky buyers. I think, you know, I love it when the buyer knows exactly what they want. I love that. Now, again, if what they want doesn't exist at all, then that's a different thing. But how can we help them get past that fear of loss, that what they are looking for out there does exist and they don't want to settle for something else, right? We're going to take them through all the steps of the process, and then again, everything works out. But let's focus on you and what you're looking for, which hopefully does exist out there in the market. And maybe we look and we say, you know, yeah, 5 homes have sold in the last year. There's nothing on the market right now, but you know, let's see. If 5 homes sold last year, there's probably going to be 5 people ready to move this year. The second letter, I guess you could say, the second step is database, CDP, right? Consult and then database or database search. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our database. Our team is talking to people every single day. We talk to 25 people a week, every person on my team, sometimes more. I've talked to 100 people in a week. They're all new people that we're talking to about buying and selling around, you know, Western Pennsylvania, the greater Pittsburgh area. Again, that's our market, but this will work anywhere. And we're going to go into our database and say, is there anybody that we've already talked to within the last 6 months that lives there, that owns a home, that might be thinking of moving? We're also at that point, you know, looking on the MLS, right? That's our database too. And we do have clients that find homes that are on the market that fit what they're looking for. Or we say, hey, 80 homes have come on the market in the last 6 months that fit your criteria. At this point, there's a home coming on the market every week, or 2 homes coming on the market every week that fit what you're looking for. Let's just focus on that for a little bit here. So we look through our database, we determine, is there anybody who we've already talked to that's thinking about moving? Maybe we talked to them randomly, maybe they visited our website, maybe they checked out a video like this one that you're watching right now, and then which led to further conversation. Maybe they had their home advertised for sale by owner on Zillow or Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace or something like that. And we talked to them a few months ago, and you know, people do that all the time when they're not really ready to move. They're just, what they say, putting out feelers, right? So maybe we've got somebody who was putting out feelers 3 months ago, but now they're a little bit closer. Or maybe they had their house listed on the market last year and it didn't sell for whatever reason, one reason or another, but maybe they're still interested in selling, right? So now we need to pick up the phone. We need to call those people. We need to get a hold of those people. And that's actually the second C, right? So CDP, CDP. So I skipped the P. I mix it up in my own head. It's easy to remember, and I still do that. The first P is actually what we call property radar. So let's say there is nobody in our database, or maybe there is, but we want to open up and find the most options possible for you as a buyer, right? That's what you want. So we use a tool that we actually, it's actually called Property Radar, but there's a lot of tools out there that are available to us as agents, and probably even you as a consumer, that will do this. Based on tax records, we'll go and we'll find exactly what you're looking for. Every county, again, this is Pennsylvania, we're a Commonwealth, that changes things compared to maybe some other states, but every county is a little different in how they handle property and tax records. But if we know the general size of the house, we know the area, we know the size of the lot, in some cases, the exact number of bedrooms, bathrooms, the location of bedrooms, bathrooms, what else, you know, is 1 story versus 2 stories, detached garage, attached garage, swimming pool, you know, all of these details that would be in the tax records, and sometimes more. We have access to that, and we can go and say, okay, there's no homes on the market right now that meet what you're looking for. There's been 15 homes on the market in the last year, which is, you know, maybe not a lot. But there's 80 homes in the neighborhood where you're looking that all meet your criteria. And if any one of those 80 would come on the market today, you'd be excited about it, right? It'd be worth going to look at. Maybe it's not the perfect house for you once we get in and look at it, but it'd be worth seeing in person to find out more. Okay, so now that we have all these properties, now we have to do what? I already said this before, I went out of order, but we have to get a hold of them. The first thing I'm gonna do as the agent is I'm gonna pick up the phone and I'm going to call CDP times 2. C is for call. I'm going to call those people. You'd be surprised, right? So this is where, first of all, a lot of agents will probably watch this. This is where I lose half of the agents because they're not going to pick up the phone and call even somebody that's in their database, let alone a stranger who they've never talked to before. You would be surprised the number of people who are out there thinking about selling their homes, ready to move. You are probably one of them if you're watching this video. Maybe you own your current home, maybe you don't, but people who own their homes that are in the same boat as you, they want something, but they haven't seen it out there on the market. They have that home sale contingency kind of looming over their head, right? Where they're, just lacking options. And if we called them and said, hey, have you had any thoughts of selling? Would you consider selling if we could bring you a great offer and make the timing and everything else work to what you need? A lot of people say yes to that, believe it or not, right? If I call 100 people, I'll probably talk to 20 of them. 80 of them won't answer the first time I call. Out of those 20, maybe 15 of them won't be interested. Maybe a couple of them will hang up on me, or they think I'm a telemarketer or something like that. But usually when I say, hey, my name's Brian, I'm a local agent, I'm calling about your house on Main Street, would you have any interest in selling? You'd be surprised that 5 out of that 20, again, on average, are thinking about selling. Actually, statistically, the number is, I think, 6. It's 6%. So it's 6 out of the 100. 6 of those people are thinking about selling. Again, I talk to 20, maybe I get a hold of 5, maybe I get a hold of 3 or 4 that tell me that they are thinking about selling. And we call more than once too. So the second round, I might talk to a different 15 or 20 people. And I'm going to share some stories with you guys here about how this actually works with the specifics and the numbers and everything else, because we are using this system for our clients and it is working. We are helping our clients find homes that are not even on the market. But we've got to call them, we've got to have those conversations. And again, my team's doing that every single day. That's why we have that database of 4,000 buyers and potential, I guess, buyers and sellers of people that we've talked to. The second letter, the second D, CDP, is direct mail. In other words, a letter, maybe a postcard, but usually it's a letter. A personalized letter to the sellers of those homes that we've already kind of picked out and said, these homes look 80% like they would work for you unless we go inside and there's something, terribly wrong or terribly different about the inside that we wouldn't have seen from the outside. These homes would work for you. We send them a personalized letter and tell them, basically that you're interested in just asking the same question. Would you have any interest in selling your house, or do you know anybody else in the neighborhood with a home like yours who's thinking about selling? Again, you'd be surprised the number of phone calls that I get in response to one of these letters. Sometimes I get calls in response to these letters where they say, hey, I read the letter of everything your client's looking for, and I think my house would be perfect for them. Unfortunately, I'm not thinking about moving, right? But we're getting them to call us back and we're gauging that market. And again, out of those 100 houses, I'd probably get 5 to 10 calls. And out of those 5 to 10, I might get 3 or 4 people who tell me they're thinking about it. Now, some of them will say, we're thinking about it, but we know it's not going to happen for 2 years. We've got a kid that needs to graduate or whatever the case may be. And every once in a while, I get somebody who says, we're thinking about it right now. We were talking about interviewing real estate agents next week because we think we want to put our house on the market in July. That's one of the scenarios that we're looking for, but it happens pretty often. And again, I'm going to share stories with you here about this. And then the very last thing that we need to do as part of this system as the agents, and again, I'm just giving you all of the elements of our system, and I'm going to again show you examples of who it's actually worked for. But the last thing that we're going to do as the agent before you come in to see the house in person is we're going to preview the house, right? A preview is what I call, it's not a showing because the buyer's not there. It's the agent, myself, or somebody on my team going to the house, meeting the seller, walking around the house and determining, is it even worth bringing the buyer in here? Is this, again, our expectations from the outside, are they met when we go into the house? Sometimes we go into the house and we look and we go, my gosh, the amount of updates and improvements that have been made to this house make it probably worth $100,000 more than what we thought. And again, that's where we need to determine, what's important to the seller. And we're going to have that conversation with them before we waste your time taking you to see a $300,000 house with a $200,000 budget, and we know that the seller's going to want $300,000. Good luck, getting them down in that case. Not that it couldn't happen. So that is our system. And I want to go back again, because I spent some time talking about all of these problems, right, that are out there with your timing, with the lack of communication between buyers and sellers, with the financing options or lack thereof financing options, and just the emotional roller coaster. Well, when you find a home that's not on the market yet, or maybe not even going to be on the market at all, you don't have to wait in line. There's no other buyers that are looking at that house. You don't have to race to get over there. You don't have to walk around the house with 40 other people there. You're, in most cases, the only buyer. And if there is one other person who the seller has happened to talk to that might be an interested buyer, then okay, you've got 2, but it's still better than 40. You don't have to worry about, your agent going out of town. First of all, I never go out of town. I think it's in this market, we have to be able to respond. And if I do go out of town, I have somebody on my team who would be able to meet our buyers and take them into the house, right? But again, in this case, we just schedule what's going to work for you, what's going to work for the agent, what's going to work for the seller, and everybody has kind of time to coordinate. And if we say, hey, it's next Thursday, then it's next Thursday. The house isn't on the market. It's not going anywhere between now and then. That gives you time to do a little bit of research on the neighborhood as well. Other factors, surrounding area, things like that. Go drive by the house, do a Google Street View. Come up with some questions, and then maybe we get answers in the meantime, or maybe we can, ask the seller after we've walked through the house. But you've had some time to think about it before you even get in there to look at it. And, home sale contingencies, right? Again, focusing on timing, but this is one that's repetitive in every category of problems, is you already own a home. What do? Well, your timing's not rushed. This gives you time to get your house ready, just in case we do go and we like what we see and you do decide to make the seller an offer and they do accept it. You've had some time to get your house ready. And again, at this point, before you're coming in to see the house, the agent, whether that's me or somebody on my team, has already previewed the house. Maybe they've even taken some pictures if the seller allowed them to take pictures. Not professional photography that makes all the rooms look bigger than they are, which, I'm not knocking photographers. We use a great photographer. They use a wide angle lens, captures the whole room. It takes a wide picture. It also makes the middle of the room look further away, right? It messes with the depth perception. That's why those rooms always look bigger. It's not like the agents and the photographers are doing it on purpose to try to deceive you. That's just the way the camera works. If you take a tighter lens or a tighter photo, then you don't get the whole room and you'd be looking at corners of rooms and you wouldn't even be able to figure out what you're looking at. That's just a sidebar on real estate photography. But when I go into a house, we're not putting it on the market. I'm not bringing my photographer with me when I preview. I'm taking cell phone pictures. May not look very great, but they're probably accurate. And I might take 100 of them while I'm there. And, at that point, you might be 90% sure before you even go into the house that you're going to want to make an offer. So you better get your house ready to be listed on the market within a couple of days of that point. Questions, we talked about that. You want to know what the utilities are. Sometimes the sellers are still going to be in the house with you or with us when you're looking at it, because there's no lockbox on this house. They don't have an agent or somebody else that's going to let them in. Now, there's pros and cons to that. When we do the preview, we'll ask the seller, are you comfortable being here with the buyers? Would you like to step out? Usually after they meet me or they meet one of the agents on my team, even though we don't represent them, we're not their client, they're comfortable enough, leaving the door unlocked and taking a walk around the neighborhood so that you can see the property in peace. Sometimes not. Sometimes they're going to stay in the house. And we'll usually prep them on, stay out of our way kind of while we're trying to look around. But there's good and bad to that. That's a great opportunity to ask them, those silly little questions. Hey, how much is the water bill here? How much is the gas bill? How much do what temperature do you keep the thermostat at? Because that's the other question that as a seller's agent, I actually hate when people ask about utilities, because everybody's usage is going to be different. If you take 2 showers a day and you keep the thermostat at 68 degrees in the summertime, then your bills are going to be astronomical. That has nothing to do with the next buyer. Anyway, furniture, inclusions, things like that. Hey, would you be willing to include the washer and dryer? Are you taking this couch with you? Things like that. Now, the lenders don't like to see couches and furniture all, being part of the agreement, and they don't want to feel like you're making that part of the mortgage, because they're in the business of financing houses, not washers and dryers and couches. You have to, go to Levin or whatever and get take out one of their charges after you buy the house. But again, the reality is sellers don't always want to take everything with them, and sometimes we can kind of factor in some of those other items, even if the sale is done separately. And again, price is not always the most important thing to the seller. Now, I probably wouldn't recommend you try to talk to the seller a lot about price during the showing. That's a conversation that needs to be some distance between buyer and seller for that. There's a great book on negotiations. I won't dive too deep into this, but the book is called Never Split the Difference. It's by a guy named Chris Voss. He's an FBI negotiator, and he'll tell you, he says, I should say in that book, that most of the time he's not even in the same country where the situation is happening. They want to create a little bit of distance, and they want to create intermediaries. They want a lot of people involved, and they don't want to be too close to the situation. Buyer and seller talking to each other directly while the agent's kind of just standing like a fly on the wall, that's never a good thing. But again, your agent can talk directly to the seller, and that is a good thing. Yeah, financing options, again, you're not competing against cash because you're probably not competing against anything. You're probably not dealing with appraisal waivers. Let's talk about inspection contingencies. The seller is going to be a lot more likely to accept an offer with an inspection contingency in it if their house isn't even on the market. Why do I say that? Well, what is every seller's main objection to the inspection contingency is, we don't want to take our house off the market, tell all the other buyers it's sold, and then have the buyer whose offer we accepted come in, do a home inspection, and then terminate, and we have to go back on the market. Or ask us for a whole bunch of items that we have to fix, and then we're stuck between a rock and a hard place because, again, this is the seller speaking, don't want to go back on the market and have to disclose all those defects that came up in the inspection. Well, if the house is never on the market in the first place, then who cares about going quote unquote back on the market? Nobody's even going to know about it. Now, does the seller still have to disclose things? Yes, of course. But as far as just the stigma itself of, oh my God, this house sold and it came back on the market, there must be something wrong with it. The other 99.9% of buyers out there that would be looking at that house the first time it pops up on the MLS have no idea that there was a previous buyer. And actually, as a seller, you're getting a free inspection report from the buyer. If they do terminate, they have to provide a copy of the report. And then you have a pretty good understanding of where you're at and what your options are when you do go on the market and approach those other buyers. So there's, again, pros and cons for the seller as well with accepting an offer that has that inspection contingency. For the buyer, the benefits are obvious, and it's a great thing. We don't ever recommend that any of our clients waive that inspection contingency unless they're an investor and they're planning on putting $100,000 into the house anyways or something like that. So again, back to the emotional roller coaster thing, and I kind of already dove into the solution here. Does this work for everyone? Well, yes, it works, but it doesn't always work the way that the buyer thinks it's going to work at the beginning. We've had clients where I've talked to hundreds of people, and I had one client in particular that I'm thinking of. They had a specific school district or specific large area. I'll just say it was North Allegheny School District, one of the larger geographic areas. There's a ton of homes. I think right now it's the #1 school district in the state, and that was where they wanted to be. They had some specific things they were looking for in the house. They had some room to give on some of that. So the first kind of wave of calls we made, we were very specific on the house and went in and previewed probably 2 or 3 houses, took them to see 1 or 2 of those houses. I think 1 or 2 maybe we determined weren't even going to be a good fit, so we didn't bother. Then we opened up the search a little bit and said, you know what, okay, 1 story would be great, but realistically 2 stories would be fine. Made hundreds of phone calls, sent out hundreds of letters, took this client to see, between my previews and houses that I actually showed them, probably 9 or 10 homes that were not even on the market. A lot of buyers out there today can't even go and see 9 or 10 homes that are on the market, let alone 9 or 10 homes that no other buyers are looking at. What we determined was none of those homes were really what were going to work for them. And some of the things that they really liked the idea of weren't actually going to work for them in reality. So we, over time, over the course of a couple months, help them to kind of filter through, you know, their wants and their needs and determine a couple things. One, that everything they thought they wanted in a house, maybe they weren't going to find in that area. Now, that's disappointing, but let me tell you, previously, before we worked with them, they worked with another agent for like 3 years. A house would pop up once every 3 months. They'd go look at it, they'd get excited, then they'd get disappointed, and then nothing else would come on the market for 3 months after that. Within probably 2 months, we were able to essentially filter out the entire area that they thought that they wanted to live. They said, you know what, no house, not only in the last 3 years have no houses come on the market that have worked for us, but in the last 2 months, I feel like you've talked to every homeowner whose house we even would have thought would work for us, and they're either not moving or it turns out the houses just won't work for us. And we expanded their search, and they ended up finding their dream home in another area that was probably 30 miles away from that initial area where they thought they wanted to be. We removed the fear of loss for them. And I will say that in the 2 or 3 years since they closed on that house, no other homes have come on the market. We do a lot of business in North Allegheny. No other homes have come on the market that made me think like, oh wow, they would have loved this, right? So we saved them probably 3 years where they're now in their dream house. They've been building equity for the last 3 years, right? And living in a house that they love, where they were, you know, previously in a house for 3 years that they didn't really want to be in. Can you imagine if you had to live for 6 years in a house that you didn't really want to be in? We're removing, you know, that fear of loss from this equation and saying, you know what, we're not afraid of missing out on anything anymore. If we miss out, that's fine, but you know, it's a 1 in a million shot, and let's expand our search. Let's go find, you know, happiness somewhere else. Now, I don't want to make it sound like this system doesn't work and it's like a roundabout way of just eliminating what you as the buyer think that you want and need. Again, we have a lot of buyers that find exactly what they want. So I'm going to share with you a couple quick stories. I'm going to give you some specific examples. I just gave you one specific example, but that was kind of a weird one because that was somebody that didn't work out the way that they had originally expected. I'm going to tell you about another couple. I'm going to call them Steve and Danielle. That's not their real names. I'm going to change the names here to protect the innocent. And I've talked about these guys before on some of the webinars that we've done on this and other topics. But they're one of my favorite stories. We just helped them close on their house a few weeks ago. They had been looking, again, for years. They had been working with, I think, multiple other agents. I actually helped them buy their, you know, what at this point is their previous house a few years ago. And they called me back shortly after and said, you know, this house is great. And it's certainly, you know, better than where we were, and we're happy here. But, you know, our radar is still up. And we'd like some more land. We'd like some more privacy. You know, the house is great. The size of the house and everything is great. The location is great. If we could be in this general area, but with some more privacy, some more land, you know, we would love that. If anything comes up, you know, keep us in mind. We'll jump on it. And there was a few things that had come up that we went to look at. And I said, you know what, you guys are really specific about what you're looking for. These houses are not coming on the market, but let's see what's out there. And did a search, did a property radar, and determined that there was about 50 properties out there that matched their criteria of what they were looking for in the house and in the land and in the location that they were looking. Called all 50 of those people, talked to 25 of them, called probably 2 or 3 times through the list of people. 25 of them answered. Out of those 25, you know, 22 of them told me, no, we're not interested in moving. We love our house. We've got land and privacy, and it's everything that we want. And I know that's why they want it too. That leaves 3 people that did answer their phones and tell me that, yes, we are thinking about moving. One of those people, it turns out he's probably not ready until next year. Another one had something else going on, I'm not sure. One of them said, yeah, you know, I'd entertain an offer, come over and take a look at my house. I went over, did the preview. The house was gorgeous. I was worried that it was going to be more than what the clients wanted to spend. Because again, we went in, oh my God, there's a ton of updates, ton of improvements. This house is even better than we expected. Took some pictures, sent them to the buyers. They said, you know, let's go see it. We went and saw it. They had a lot of thinking to do, obviously. We went back again a second time, a week later. The seller said, of course, it's a big house, it's a big decision. We're not in a hurry. Come back a second time. Now, in both of these cases, the seller had actually stepped out of the house. I had built enough of a rapport with them, I guess, that they figured, what, our house is secure. They can come in and take a look. We'll leave the door unlocked, and Brian will call us when he's done, and we'll go back home and lock we'll be home. We'll lock all the doors. So that's what we did. We looked at the house twice. We submitted an offer. The offer was lower than what the seller wanted. The offer was lower than what I thought that we were going to get the house for after I went in and did my initial preview. But talking to the seller, it was apparent that price was probably not the most important thing. Initially, the seller didn't accept the offer. He said, this is lower than what we wanted. I know I said price wasn't the most important thing, but it's too low. There's nothing to even talk about. And I said, well, okay, I understand that. If we were going to talk about it, what offer, what would that have to look like for us to even be able to have that conversation? He gave me a number. I said, I'll take that number back to the buyers. Is that an official counteroffer? If they'll agree to it, will we have a deal? He said, if they would agree to that, yeah, we would have a deal right now. Now we're closer together. Initially, I should add, the seller didn't tell us what he wanted for the house. He would not name a number. We went back and forth for 2 months. 2 months of going back and forth. Now, it wasn't a lot of back and forth. There was a lot of time in between, rounds, I'll say. Ended up agreeing on a number that, again, was in the range of where I thought that the house would sell, but it was near the bottom end of that range. Buyer did their appraisal. Appraised value came back a lot higher than that. I think I already said the number. And the buyers got their dream home for a lot less than probably what that house would have sold for if it was on the market. And the seller didn't have to deal with getting his big, huge house with all of its property and everything ready for the market. He didn't have to worry about lock boxes and all of those, one-off showings. He only had to deal with our showing twice. And of course we had an inspection contingency, so they had to, leave the house for that. And we had a home sale contingency. My clients put their, current house, or in this case, at this point, previous house that I had helped them buy a few years ago, put that on the market, got multiple offers on their house, and we closed on that house actually before we closed on the new house. So they had to go and stay at a hotel basically for a little while, but it worked out because they got their dream house. The seller had plenty of time to move all of his things out of the house. They ended the school year. This process started in January and we just closed a couple weeks ago. So that's one story of a successful buyer finding a house that was not on the market. Again, not only had no other house come up in the last couple of years that was really a home run. Now, there might have been some that were like, oh, we missed out on this one, but nothing really. In the 6 months since we started dealing with that particular property, no other homes have come on the market that were even remotely close to what they were looking for, and not even remotely close to being in that price range if they did have any of the things they were looking for. So that fear of loss, at that point for those buyers is completely gone, and I know that they're happy because I talk to them all the time. It's one of my, they're some of my favorite people, and it's one of my favorite success stories in our business. It makes us feel good to get people into their dream homes. Another example, I'm gonna call these guys Vinny and Patty. Vinny and Patty, that's what I'm gonna call them. I met them. They requested a showing on a listing through our website or through some website. And it was late in the summertime. This was a couple years ago. And they wanted to see a townhouse in Cranberry. I met them at the townhouse in Cranberry, showed them the house, talked to them a little bit about what they were looking for. And I said, you guys don't want to be in Cranberry. You want to be in Wexford. There's a couple of neighborhoods over there that we're familiar with, that we do a lot of business. Let me see. I think there's a listing over there right now. Let's go. I think we can get in. I took them that same night. We went and saw a house in this neighborhood, and they said, look, our lease isn't even up till February. Again, this was late summer. We just started talking about this weekend. We called you. That was the first thing we'd done. And, this is a lot for us. We're not going to put in an offer on this house because, of course, they have multiple offers already, and they needed an offer by 2 hours after we're seeing it, which is probably 24 hours after these buyers, our clients, even got the idea of buying a home because they were getting 6 months away from their lease. So I said, that's fine. You know, other homes will come up. And we kept in touch a little bit, but you know, it got to be like October, November, and they're like, okay, we're starting to get nervous because now we're 4 months away. No other homes have listed in this neighborhood. Yeah, you're right. So let me make some calls. Like I said, I do a lot of business in this neighborhood. Let me do a database search. There's plenty of people in our database. Let me just talk to some people. And again, they knew at that point they wanted to be in that neighborhood. They said, we should have jumped on that one when we had the chance. Don't worry, everything will be fine. We found them a seller who had already taken photos of her house. She already had an agent. They had already discussed pricing. They already knew exactly what they wanted to do, but she was waiting to find the house. And nothing in the neighborhood she wanted to move to was coming on the market. But she said, you know what? Once it comes on the market, I'm ready to list my house right away, but I'll still need a home sale contingency. And even if I tell that seller of the house that I'm looking to buy that I'll have my house on the market within a day, I still don't know the likelihood that they're going to accept my offer. So I should probably get it sold, but I need to make sure I have enough time to find something, whether that's, whether I need to find a temporary arrangement or go rent somewhere else or put myself in a better position so that when the house in the neighborhood I want pops up, I can jump on it. So we went in, we looked at the house, made an offer. Again, we knew what the price was that they were looking for. I think the price was good. We probably agreed to that price or pretty close to it, but with all the inspection contingencies, the appraisal contingency, buyers had plenty of time to ask questions and get cost estimates and projections and do spreadsheets, and they knew what their budget was going to be for like the next 3 years, and everything worked for them. We made the offer, we did the home inspection. I think there was a couple items we negotiated on the home inspection, closed on the house, and then actually what we were able to do on that one, and then what we were able to do in that case was close on the house and give the seller what we call post-settlement possession. They didn't need to move out until the end of February from the house that they were renting. We closed in January and let the seller stay in the house until the end of February. That was, that was great for her because house, I'm pretty sure anyways, that a house that she was looking for popped up at some point in that time period. She had the money sitting in her bank account. The house was already sold, but she was still living there. She moved out. Everything was great. Of course, there was like a deposit that she had put down just to make sure nothing got damaged when she was moving out, and nothing did. Everything worked out great. Those clients are super happy. I talk to them all the time. They've recommended, a bunch of other clients to us. One more story. I'm going to call this couple Steve and Tina. They were first-time home buyers. They came to an open house at one of our listings at a house in Westview. This was January of last year. They came to the open house. They said, we're just starting. We don't have an agent. We haven't done anything. We saw the open house sign or we saw it online and we figured we'd stop by. They met with an agent on my team who was there hosting the open house. The agent sat down with them and determined, you guys probably don't actually want to be in Westview. You like older homes, that kind of thing. But the amenities and stuff that you're looking for, you'd probably be better off in like Bellevue or one of those areas with a little better walkability for what you're looking to do. They totally agreed. They loved the area, showed them like some examples of homes that had sold, and the market was starting to get really competitive. So we said, yeah, there's going to be plenty of homes that are coming on the market, but these guys are first-time home buyers. I think they were using an FHA mortgage. They had enough money to cover their closing costs, but they didn't have enough money to like waive inspections and go through crazy stuff. Because again, waiving inspections cost you money if you buy the house and then find out that it needs a roof 6 months later. So we sent out some letters. What happened was somebody got one of those letters who wasn't interested, but they knew somebody who also happened to be in our database. So it was kind of a weird thing how it all happened. But as it turns out, it was kind of a double between the database phase of our search and the direct mail phase of our search. And basically reached out to us and said like, hey, I'm not selling my house, but so-and-so, who I think mentioned to me the other day that they're thinking about selling. Of course, we didn't know this person very well, but we knew them well enough that they were in our database. So we reached out to them. They also knew exactly what they wanted for the house. They were getting ready to sell, but they were about a month away, and took these buyers to see the house. I think we took them to see a couple of houses that were on market that same weekend. Granted, this is like 2 weekends after the open house. Met them at the open house, met with them for a consultation, you know, a week later, something like that. And then that weekend took them to see 2 or 3 houses, one of them being this off-market house. They put in an offer on the off-market house. Seller accepted a price that was lower than what it was going to go on the market for because she didn't have to pay a listing agent commission. She represented herself. We represented the buyer. We negotiated for her to pay our side of the commission so the buyer didn't have to worry about that. We did the inspections. We were able to negotiate after the inspections even. Did the appraisal. There was no issues with the appraisal because, again, the price was good. So the house appraised for more than what they had agreed to pay for it. And we gave the seller just a couple of days of again, a post-settlement possession where she was able to stay in the house for just a couple of days after closing, maybe 3 or 4 days or an extra weekend or something like that, if I remember correctly. And it was a win-win situation. So here you have first-time home buyers in the spring of 2022 when the market was as competitive as it's ever been. This is before the rates went up and things started to slow down. The market was absolutely crazy. You have these first-time home buyers who looked at 3 homes and got their first offer accepted on a home in a competitive area at a very competitive price, at a low price, with the home inspections, with appraisals, FHA mortgage. They put 3.5% down, and then actually got a little bit of a seller's assist after the inspection is what ended up happening. So these things weren't happening to other buyers in the spring of 2022, right? Like anybody who was in the business, maybe again, some of you who are watching this have been in the market that long that you were putting in offers in the spring and obviously they weren't getting accepted, unfortunately. So what do you have to do to start this process? The good news is all you have to do is reach out to us and schedule that consultation. That's the first step. I talked about that. We will sit down with you. We'll talk about everything that you're looking for. Go through our database, go through the property radar, and then come up with a game plan to find you a house that is not yet on the market. An off-market property. We call it our inventory creator method, or we call it our off-market property finder method. Either way, it's great for you. If you have any questions, reach out to me. Again, my name is Brian Riley. I'm with RE/MAX City Life here in Pittsburgh. All of my information will be in the description or caption or wherever, on whatever platform you're watching this, but I appreciate you watching this video. I know it was a bit of a long one. I hope you got a lot of value out of it, and I look forward to talking with you and helping you find your dream home.